Hello, everyone. Welcome back to JeyBTechAcademy, and welcome to Lesson 11 of our SQL Server Mastery course. In our previous lesson, we learned how SQL Server evaluates multiple conditions using operator precedence and parentheses. We discovered that even a small change in the order of evaluation can completely change the result of a SQL query. Today, we're going to learn 3 powerful SQL operators that will make your queries shorter, cleaner, and much easier to write. These operators are in, between, and like. Let's start with the in operator. Imagine you want to retrieve employees from the IT department, the HR department, and the sales department. One way is to write multiple OR conditions. The query works, but it becomes longer and harder to read. The in operator gives us a much simpler solution. Next, we'll learn the between operator. Instead of writing multiple comparison conditions, between allows us to retrieve values within a specific range. Whether you're searching for salaries, dates, ages, or prices, between makes your queries much cleaner. Finally, we'll learn the like operator. This operator is used when we want to search for text that matches a specific pattern. For example, finding employee names that start with a particular letter or contain a specific word. The like operator is widely used in search features, customer applications, and reporting systems. By the end of this lesson, you'll know when to use each of these operators and how they help you write SQL queries that are shorter, easier to read, and more professional. These are not just SQL commands. They are practical tools that every SQL developer uses almost every day. So let's begin and discover how to write smarter SQL queries with the in, between, and like operators. In the previous lessons, we learned how to filter data using the where clause and logical operators. Now let's look at a situation that every SQL beginner encounters. Suppose you want to retrieve employees who work in the IT department, the HR department, the sales department, and the support department. Most beginners write a query like this: department equals it, or department equals HR, or department equals sales, or department equals support. There is nothing wrong with this query. It works correctly, but as the number of conditions increases, the query becomes longer, harder to read, and more difficult to maintain. Now imagine your manager asks you to add 5 more departments. Your where clause keeps growing. Soon, your query becomes messy and difficult to understand. Wouldn't it be better if SQL allowed us to write the same logic in a much shorter and cleaner way? The good news is, it does. That's exactly why the in operator exists. Instead of writing multiple OR conditions, the in operator lets us specify a list of values in a single condition. The result is exactly the same, but the query is much shorter, much cleaner, and much easier to read. This is one of the reasons professional SQL developers prefer using the in operator whenever multiple values belong to the same column. And that's just the beginning. In this lesson, you'll also learn the between operator for working with ranges and the like operator for searching text patterns. By the end of this lesson, you'll be writing SQL queries that are shorter, cleaner, and much more professional. Let's begin by understanding how the in operator works and why it's one of the most useful operators in SQL. Now let's understand the first operator in today's lesson, the in operator. The in operator is used when we want to compare a column with multiple possible values. Instead of writing the same column name again and again using multiple OR conditions, we can simply provide a list of values inside the in operator. This makes our SQL query much shorter and much easier to understand. Let's take a simple example. Suppose your manager asks you to find employees who work in the IT department, the HR department, the sales department, or the support department. One solution is to write multiple OR conditions. That approach works, but it requires more typing and makes the query longer. The in operator provides a much cleaner solution. We simply write the column name once and provide the list of values inside parentheses. SQL Server then checks each row in the table. If the value in that column matches any value in the list, that row is included in the result. If it doesn't match any value, SQL Server skips that row. In other words, the IN operator asks a very simple question. Is this value present in the list? If the answer is yes, the row is returned. If the answer is no, the row is ignored. The biggest advantage of the IN operator is readability. Your SQL queries become shorter. They become cleaner, and they are much easier for other developers to understand and maintain. Whenever you need to compare one column with multiple values, think about using the IN operator instead of writing several OR conditions. It saves time, reduces unnecessary code, and helps you write SQL like a professional. In the next slide, we'll compare the traditional OR approach with the IN operator side by side, and you'll see just how much simpler your SQL queries can become. Now let's compare two different ways of solving the same problem. Our requirement is simple. We want to retrieve employees who belong to the IT department, the HR department, the sales department, or the support department. The first query uses multiple OR conditions. It checks whether the department is IT, or HR, or sales, or support. This query is completely correct. SQL Server will execute it without any problems. However, notice how the query becomes longer as we keep adding more departments. If tomorrow your manager asks you to include 2 more departments, you'll have to add even more OR conditions. The query becomes longer, harder to read, and more difficult to maintain. Now look at the second query. Instead of writing multiple OR conditions, we use the IN operator. We write the column name only once. Then we place all the required values inside the parentheses. SQL Server checks whether the department matches any value in the list. If it finds a match, that row is returned. If it doesn't find a match, SQL Server ignores that row. Both queries produce exactly the same result. The only difference is the way they are written. The IN operator makes the query much shorter. It improves readability. It reduces repetitive code. And it makes future changes much easier. Suppose you want to remove the sales department. With the OR approach, you need to remove an entire condition. With the IN operator, you simply remove one value from the list. That's much simpler. This is why professional SQL developers prefer the IN operator whenever they need to compare one column against multiple values. It keeps SQL code clean. It keeps SQL code organized. And it makes your queries much easier for other developers to understand. Always remember this simple rule. If you're comparing the same column with multiple values, the IN operator is usually the best choice. In the next slide, we'll learn another powerful operator called between, which helps us filter data within a specific range instead of listing individual values. Now let's learn another very useful SQL operator. The between operator. The between operator is used when we want to retrieve values that fall within a specific range. Instead of writing 2 comparison conditions, SQL Server allows us to write the same logic using a single between statement. Let's understand this with an example. Suppose your manager asks you to find all employees whose salary is between $40,000 and $60,000. One way to write this query is by using 2 comparison operators. Salary greater than or equal to $40,000, and salary less than or equal to $60,000. This approach is correct, but there is an easier and cleaner way. We can simply write salary between $40,000 and $60,000. Both queries return exactly the same result. However, the between operator makes the query much shorter and much easier to read. Now, there's one very important point you should always remember. The between operator is inclusive. That means SQL Server includes both the starting value and the ending value. If we write salary between $40,000 and $60,000, employees with a salary of exactly $40,000 are included. Employees with a salary of exactly 60,000 are also included. Everything between those two values is returned as well. The between operator is not limited to salaries. It can also be used with dates. For example, finding employees who joined between January 1st and December 31st. It can also be used with prices, quantities, ages, marks, and many other types of numeric or date values. Whenever you need to retrieve data within a range, the between operator is usually the best choice. It keeps your SQL queries simple. It improves readability. And it makes your code easier to maintain. Always remember this simple rule. If you're checking whether a value falls between two limits, use the between operator instead of writing multiple comparison conditions. In the next slide, we'll learn the like operator, which helps us search for text using patterns instead of exact values. Now let's learn one of the most powerful and widely used operators in SQL. The like operator. So far, we've searched for exact values. For example, finding employees whose department is IT, or whose salary falls within a specific range. But what if you don't know the exact value you're looking for? Suppose you only know that an employee's name starts with the letter A. Or maybe the name contains the word an. Or perhaps the name ends with son. In these situations, the like operator becomes very useful. The like operator allows us to search for text based on a pattern instead of an exact value. To create these patterns, SQL Server uses special wildcard characters. The most common wildcard is the % symbol. It represents any number of characters, including 0 characters. For example, if we write a pattern that starts with the letter A followed by the % symbol, SQL Server returns all values that begin with the letter A. If we place the % symbol before and after a word, SQL Server returns every value that contains that word anywhere in the text. Another useful wildcard is the underscore. The underscore represents exactly one character. This is helpful when you know part of the value, but one character may be different. The like operator is used in many real-world applications. It powers search boxes. It helps users find customers, products, employees, and many other records without knowing the exact value. It also plays an important role in reports, filtering screens, and business applications. Whenever you need to search for text based on a pattern instead of an exact match, the like operator is the right choice. It gives your users more flexibility and makes your SQL queries much more powerful. In the next slide, we'll explore wildcard characters in more detail and see how different patterns produce different search results. Now let's take a closer look at the wildcard characters used with the like operator. Wildcards are special characters that help us search for text patterns instead of exact values. The most commonly used wildcard is the % symbol. The % symbol represents 0 or more characters. For example, if we write a pattern that starts with the letter A followed by the % symbol, SQL Server returns every value that begins with the letter A. Names such as Aaron, Alex, and Anand will all match this pattern. Now let's place the % symbol at the beginning and at the end of a word. For example, the pattern % and %. This tells SQL Server to return every value that contains the letters and anywhere in the text. The word can appear at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. Next, let's look at another wildcard. The underscore. The underscore represents exactly one character. For example, if we write a pattern where the first character can be anything, followed by the letter A, SQL Server returns values where the second character is A. Unlike the % symbol, the underscore matches only one character. This makes it useful when you know the position of a character, but not the exact value. By combining these wildcard characters, you can create very flexible search conditions. This is one of the reasons the like operator is so powerful. It allows users to search even when they don't know the complete value. You'll find the like operator in search boxes, customer management systems, employee directories, product catalogs, and many other business applications. Whenever your users need to search using only part of a word or a partial value, the like operator is usually the best solution. Always remember these two wildcard characters. The percent symbol represents 0 or more characters. The underscore represents exactly one character. Mastering these two wildcards will make your SQL searches much more flexible and much more powerful. In the next slide, we'll look at some of the most common mistakes beginners make when using the in, between, and like operators, and learn how to avoid them. Now let's look at some of the most common mistakes beginners make when using the in, between, and like operators. Understanding these mistakes will help you write better SQL queries and avoid unexpected results. Let's start with the in operator. One common mistake is writing multiple or conditions, even when the in operator would make the query much shorter. While the query still works, it becomes longer, harder to read, and more difficult to maintain. Whenever you're comparing the same column with multiple values, the in operator is usually the better choice. Next, let's talk about the between operator. Many beginners think the between operator excludes the starting and ending values. But that's not true. The between operator is inclusive. That means both the starting value and the ending value are included in the result. Always remember this when you're filtering numbers, dates, or other ranges. Now let's look at the like operator. A very common mistake is forgetting to use wildcard characters. If you write like followed by an exact value without any wildcard characters, SQL Server behaves almost like an equality comparison. To perform a pattern search, you need to use the percent symbol or the underscore wildcard. Another mistake is placing wildcard characters in the wrong position. For example, placing the percent symbol only at the beginning, only at the end, or on both sides produces completely different search results. Always think carefully about what you're trying to match before writing the pattern. One more important habit is testing your query. Never assume your SQL query is correct just because it executes successfully. Always review the returned data and make sure it matches the business requirement. Professional SQL developers don't just focus on writing queries. They also verify that the results are correct. As you continue learning SQL, develop the habit of writing clean, readable, and maintainable queries. Choose the right operator for the right situation. Use the in operator when comparing multiple values. Use the between operator when filtering a range. Use the like operator when searching for patterns. Following these simple practices will make your SQL code easier to understand, easier to maintain, and much more professional. In the next slide, we'll apply everything you've learned today with practical real-world examples and see how these operators are used in everyday SQL development. Now let's see how these operators are used in real-world SQL applications. Learning the syntax is important, but knowing when to use each operator is what makes you a better SQL developer. Let's start with the in operator. Imagine you're developing an employee management system. Your manager wants a report showing employees from the IT, HR, and sales departments. Instead of writing multiple or conditions, you can use the in operator. The query becomes shorter, cleaner, and much easier to understand. Next, let's look at the between operator. Suppose the Human Resources Department wants to find employees whose salaries are between $40,000 and $60,000. The between operator allows us to retrieve all employees within that salary range using a single, easy-to-read condition. This makes the query simple and professional. Now let's see the like operator in action. Imagine a user is searching for an employee, but only remembers that the name starts with the letter A. Instead of searching for an exact name, we can use the like operator with wildcard characters. SQL Server will return every employee whose name matches that pattern. This is exactly how many search boxes work in real-world business applications. These three operators solve different types of problems. The in operator is used when comparing one column with multiple values. The between operator is used when searching within a range of values. The like operator is used when searching for text based on patterns. As a SQL developer, choosing the right operator makes your queries easier to write, easier to understand, and easier to maintain. Professional developers don't write long and complicated SQL statements when a simpler solution is available. They choose the operator that best fits the business requirement. That's the habit you should develop from the very beginning. Practice each of these examples in SQL Server Management Studio. Try changing the values. Add more departments to the IN operator. Change the salary range in the between operator. Experiment with different like patterns. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with writing SQL queries for real-world business scenarios. In the next slide, we'll summarize everything you've learned in this lesson and quickly review the key concepts before moving on to the next topic. Congratulations! You've successfully completed Lesson 11 of our SQL Server Mastery course. In this lesson, you learned 3 powerful SQL operators that every SQL developer uses almost every day. We started with the IN operator. You learned how the IN operator helps us compare a single column with multiple values using one simple condition. Instead of writing several OR conditions, we can write cleaner and shorter SQL queries. Next, we explored the between operator. You learned how to retrieve values that fall within a specific range. Most importantly, you learned that the between operator is inclusive, which means it includes both the starting value and the ending value. After that, we learned about the like operator. You discovered how SQL Server can search for text using patterns instead of exact values. We also explored the wildcard characters, including the % symbol and the underscore, and saw how they make searches much more flexible. Finally, we looked at common beginner mistakes and discussed when to use the IN operator, the between operator, and the like operator in real-world business applications. These operators may look simple, but they can make a huge difference in the quality of your SQL queries. They help you write code that is shorter, cleaner, easier to read, and easier to maintain. Now it's your turn to practice. Open SQL Server Management Studio and write every example you've learned in this lesson. Try adding more values to the IN operator. Experiment with different ranges using the between operator. Create different search patterns using the like operator and observe how the results change. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become in writing professional SQL queries. If you found this lesson helpful, please like this video, share it with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe to JeyBTechAcademy for more beginner-friendly SQL Server tutorials. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when our next lesson is published. In the next lesson, we'll learn one of the most useful SQL clauses for organizing query results. We'll explore the order by clause and discover how to sort data in ascending and descending order like a professional. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, keep practicing, and I'll see you in Lesson 12. Closing message. Every SQL query tells a story. The better you understand SQL, the better you'll understand your data. See you in Lesson 12.